The combine is here, and it's time for the Colts to watch for some freaks. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you guys get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What up, y'all? We are obviously here together now, not just two of us on remote screens. It is Combine Week. That is obviously why Zach is here in town. And Buzz is already starting today, everybody. Players don't get to the field and start putting on a show until Thursday. But over these next couple days, on Wednesday, we'll talk to Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. We'll talk to a lot of these players all the way up into Saturday. So we'll have a ton of stuff to bring to you guys. But today, this is kind of an anticipatory show. We're going offense and defense. Which guys do we think are going to put on a show and really stamp themselves as Build-a-Ballard players? So if you're familiar with Zach's work at all over like the last 5 or 6 years, you know that Build-a-Ballard is a big part of the offseason draft process. It's a very successful tool at really predicting and identifying fits for Colts players. I'll brag on you for a minute. But no, it basically just takes like players' measurables and athletic scores and things like that with a little bit of Zach's own, mind for how the Colts work and operate and identifies the best fits for them. And so a lot of this starts right now with combine performances, getting official measurements on a lot of these guys, because schools will list guys at 6'3", and then they come to the combine and they're just a hair over 6 foot.
Yeah.
So we're going to get real measurements on these guys, real testing scores. So we're going to really start to find out which guys might be ideal fits for the Colts. We'll look offense, defense, and then just this week, the Colts have announced their coaching staff for 2024. There have been some new names that have trickled in. We now know the 3 new coaches and the 4 new staff members. So we'll talk about them at the end of this thing too. But Zach, let's look at it. We all know that the Colts want to get more explosive on offense. So is there anyone who you're looking at who you really think is going to put on a show at Lucas Oil and perhaps keep calling that field their home when the Colts start up in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys I think at the wide receiver position that make a lot of sense that I think, I have them as pre-circles for Build-a-Ballard. I think there are guys that can be Build-a-Ballard type receivers. This depends on how they test. There's certain parameters that we have to hit for those, for them to fall under that. But Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, I think when it's all said and done, is going to be one of those absolutely freaky prospects that checks every single box for Chris Ballard. And I think we're going to see something special from him this week. A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, as long as he tests really well, everything on film looks like a Build-a-Ballard type of wide receiver. It just comes down to, how do the agilities look? How does the long speed look for him? Those are really going to be the big things for him because he more won in the short to intermediate game in college. Can he show that he could be a vertical guy by running in the low 4.4s or even high 4.4s? I think would be a good number for him. Another guy that I think a lot of you guys love, I see him in the comment section every time we talk about wide receivers, is Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Had a good Senior Bowl week. I think he was a Feldman's freak going into this past season. Really, really big player. I think he measured at the Senior Bowl over 220 pounds. Runs really well. Not the most, productive college career, but we know one thing, but Chris Ballard doesn't care about how much you produce in college. He cares about those traits, the athletic ability, the upside, the size, and Xavier Legette fits all that. So I think those are the 3 big name wide receivers that we're looking at. If you want to look at some smaller names, Ryan Flournoy, is a guy that you love there. Another Feldman freak type guy, had a really good Senior Bowl week. And then Johnny Wilson, who's built like a tight end playing wide receiver from Florida State. That's another guy where, again, if he tests well, that's a Chris Ballard type of wide receiver. He likes the size. He likes the explosion. He likes vertical ability. So those are the guys I'm watching this week to really solidify themselves as Build-a-Ballard guys. And Ryan Flournoy, I think, if you're looking for like day 3 type guys, a wide receiver, Ryan Flournoy, I think, could really solidify himself as like the Build-a-Ballard day 3 guy this year.
For sure. I think Flournoy is a good one. He's an insurance policy. If you don't get what you want in the first couple of rounds, you can get him round 4 or so maybe. But no, it's a guy with great size and great long speed, of course, which Ballard always covets, but good quickness and speed within his movements as well. Like a lot of guys are good straight line speed guys, but can they dip their hips and actually move? And I watched him eat up the field in Mobile all week. I really, really like that kid. And with this deep of a receiver class, he seems like one of those guys that you can get a lot of productivity out of on day 3. Johnny Wilson seems like the early Ballard era, like guy he would fall in love with, kind of like a Mike Strawn type, like absolutely huge to the point where you wonder if he's really a tight end. Good straight line speed, but like has to move his whole body to like turn, like it's not great movement, but I mean, he could put that on display and shut me up like on the field here. But no, those guys, Brian Thomas and AD Mitchell, I think those are especially really good trade back options in the first round if they don't stay at 15, because I anticipate there's going to be a huge chunk of guys like cornerbacks and receivers that they might like, and then they move back 5 or so spots and then just kind of throw a dart at the board, whoever's their favorite.
Yeah. And then going from wide receiver to tight end, obviously we have the 2 tight ends that all Colts fans are talking about. The one that we are obviously all talking about is Brock Bowers from Georgia. Now, I don't think he's going to fit the Chris Ballard mold with his height and weight. I think he's going to come in very short and very undersized with his weight. He might be one of the few tight ends we've seen since 2000 to come in under 240 pounds, maybe under 230. We'll see what he comes in at, but I do think he'll be under 240 pounds. But as long as he has very, very good agility, is very, very good 40 time, explosive stuff, I do think that he's still a Build-a-Ballard type of tight end. Look, Chris Ballard loves the freaks at tight end. He loves the freaks on offense in general, but at tight end, I mean, these guys are all super athletes. I mean, Kylan Granson, great athlete, just a little bit shorter. You got Will Mallory was the best tight end in terms of athleticism last year. Jelani Woods, obviously, this is one of the greatest combine performances we've ever seen from a tight end. So as long as Brock Bowers can test out of this world, aside from his size, I think he's still a Chris Ballard type guy. And then Jatavian Sanders as well from Texas. I think the consensus tight end 2 in this class, did a lot of great things as a pass catcher at Texas. I think he makes a lot of sense as long as he tests really well this week. So those are 2 guys I'm really keeping an eye on at tight end to keep that explosive ability for the Colts. And again, Chris Ballard loves the athletes, and tight end is no exception to that whatsoever. Bowers and Sanders, I think those are the 2 guys who'll be looking at this week.
Yeah, I think Bowers is obviously the belle of the ball right now. I'm curious to see how many yeah buts the Colts have about him. Like,
yeah,
do you want to take a tight end without elite traits across the board? Because obviously the size is going to be an issue, and he's not necessarily a dominant blocker either. And I heard on a podcast recently, I think it was the Move the Sticks one, where a tight end taken this early is already like around the franchise tag number for a tight end.
Yeah.
So will teams want to financially strap themselves to a tight end that early? And that's a position that takes a long time to acclimate. So Jatavian Sanders could be a nice consolation prize in round 2 or 3.
Yep. And then a couple more names here at offensive line. Look, I don't think the Colts are going to go offensive tackle early in this class. They have their 2 tackles, but look, if they're looking at the board and they're thinking, hey, for the future, if Braden Smith does leave eventually, or we have to make that kind of tough decision, maybe we can get a young tackle in here that could play a little bit of guard or just be a really high level swing tackle. There are a couple tackles that really, really fit the Chris Ballard mold. Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, super athlete, very, very raw player, but a great athlete who, again, the size, the speed, the athleticism, everything Chris Ballard likes there. Patrick Paul from Houston, and Amarius Mims. I think it's Amarius Mims from Georgia. 6 career starts in college. And I swear, so many GMs are going to be terrified of that. Or I think it's 8 career starts, 6 games he's finished in college.
Yeah.
Sorry. Most GMs are going to be terrified of that, but Chris Ballard does not care. We've seen him take Malik Hooker high despite not playing many games in college. We saw him take Anthony Richardson high despite not playing many games. Kamoko Toure barely played any games in college, and he took him in round 2. So if anyone's crazy enough to take Amarius Mims high because of those traits, because of the athleticism, Chris Ballard is that type of guy. But again, I don't expect them to take a tackle in this class, but if they do, those are the 3 guys I'm really looking at because they check every single Chris Ballard box at that position.
Yeah, I think the NFL really likes Guyton. I don't think he'll be around when the Colts would be even entertaining an offensive tackle, but Paul and Mims make a lot of sense. Mims almost feels like the that kid from Michigan this year, Mayfield.
Yeah.
Jalen Mayfield, is this year's Mayfield. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball and who's going to tear it up there. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Whether it's go for a run, take a nap, read a book, whatever. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make that a priority and not worry so much about the things that aren't even much of an importance to you. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. Personally, I don't know. I'm one of those people. There's always a million things to do. I'm not Beyonce. Beyonce, we do not all have her 24 hours. And that ain't me. You know what I mean? But if you're thinking of starting therapy to get some of that stuff worked out, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge, because a big part of therapy is finding someone. Like, you don't just want to talk to any random stranger. Like, it takes time to find the right therapist for you. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn.
And Colts fans, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Locked On Colts listeners, we are back talking all about the defense, Build-a-Ballard defense. Now, when it comes to defense, I don't feel as comfortable as I do at some of the offensive positions like tackle. I feel really good with Build-a-Ballard. Tight end, very good. Wide receiver, I felt good until Josh Downs was taken. Josh Downs threw me off. But cornerback, I feel like, is my best on defense. It's really the one where Chris Ballard has rarely strayed away from his mold. And last year, the top 2 Build-a-Ballard corners in Darius Rush and Juju Brents were selected by the Colts in that draft. So we're feeling pretty good about Build-a-Ballard corners. We've got a couple guys here, a couple Senior Bowl guys here. So I know Jake can talk about a couple of them. But Cam Hart from Notre Dame, Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, Max Melton's another one who performed really well at the Senior Bowl. Those are a couple guys who I expect them to have great week of testing. I expect them to come in very big corners with long arms, and their film is good. I think those 3 guys are firmly on Chris Ballard's board, and I'd be shocked, if the Colts are taking a corner after day 1 in this class, if they don't take Cam Hart or Kyrie Jackson. Those are 2 guys that just scream Chris Ballard cornerback to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially Hart. I mean, if you guys listen to the Senior Bowl show that I did with Shad, he basically said that Cam Hart was made in a lab for Chris Ballard and the Colts and Gus Bradley. And he really shows it. Great size, great athleticism. He moves around well. Really had a strong week in Mobile. Kyrie Jackson as well. Jackson is a good, one of these things you don't think about. It seems like a good locker room guy. When we talked to Bo Nix at the beginning of the week, he talked about Jackson being, a guy that never shuts up during practice. One of those guys you love to compete against in practice and just makes you better. And it was fun to watch them go back and forth in those practices. Melton as well. That's a guy I think could probably play a little bit inside and out. And he made some big plays in Mobile. He made one where he stripped the ball from that kid from USC, that running back from USC, Marshawn Lloyd, and picked it up along the sidelines. And that's a big Colts defensive trait, playing to the whistle, ripping at the ball, and not only just ripping it, but going and getting it too. So he's already kind of got that take the ball away mentality that we know Colts defenders have to have.
Yeah, and we got to talk about the two Alabama corners as well. That's Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry. Now, there are questions about how fast Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to run this week, and I know that's what a lot of scouts have been wondering. But from what I've heard, the jumps and the explosion drills are going to be fantastic for him, and that's really what matters more for Chris Ballard. He has the GPS speed from what they did in college, so he cares more about those jumps and explosions. So if, McKinstry comes out here and he runs like a 4.5, but he jumps 40 something inches, like we saw with Juju Brents last year, that's more important to him than a corner who runs a 4.2, but jumps 30 inches. It's very unlikely for a corner to run like a 4.2 and jump 30 inches, but I'm just saying that's where he prioritizes. He prioritizes that first 10 in the 40. He prioritizes the explosions. And I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to perform very, very well in the jumps. Terrion Arnold's another guy who I expect to have a fantastic week of testing. Very, very good athlete on film. Very smooth player. The 3-cone, it's hit or miss if anyone ever does that, but I think his 3-cone and shuttles will be really good. He turns really well. Nate Wiggins from Clemson's another top-tier corner that I think is going to test out of this world this week. So I know we're not getting Cooper DeJean this week. We unfortunately are not getting Cooper DeJean, who would have tested very well on top of all that. But Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins, those top corners that the Colts could consider at 15, I think all three are going to have a great week of testing.
Quinyon Mitchell as well. That's another guy who, if he knocks this out of the park, there's nothing better he could have done to prepare for the draft in this cycle, because he was arguably the best player at this, one of the probably top 3 players at the Senior Bowl. He goes out and dominates the combine here. That's going to be huge for him. I mean, that could put him up neck and neck with Terrion Arnold. I think Arnold is a lot of people's top corner,
right,
but probably not everybody's. And so a guy like Mitchell really has a lot to gain from that.
Yep. But then going to defensive end, I know a lot of you guys think the Colts should take a defensive end high in this class, or just take a defensive end in general. Well, 2 first-round defensive ends, 2 guys who I firmly believe are going to go in round 1, who make a lot of sense for, again, the athletic fits, for the size fits, and that is Jared Verse from Florida State and Darius Robinson from Missouri. Those are 2 guys that really, really fit the Chris Ballard mold, especially Robinson, again, a guy who killed the Senior Bowl. Great tweener size that can play defensive tackle or defensive end. Super, super long arms, super productive the last year. I mean, he kind of checks every single box. And I know when you were down there at the Senior Bowl, he was just dominating the entire event.
Yeah, the Colts have a very clear track record of getting guys like this. You start with
we got Dio Dangbo, we got Kwity Paye, we got a lot of guys.
He left the Colts. Danico Autry. Okay.
Danico Autry,
You start with Danico Autry, those long guys who have the strength and versatility and athleticism to play inside and out. They go and they get Dio, they get Adonai.
Yeah.
Darius Robinson very much feels like the next guy in line for that.
Yeah.
Just a big athletic guy, inside outside versatility. He's very much their type, and he could go anywhere, especially like the Ravens. That's a very Ravens type too, but they've got to have their eyes glued to him.
Right. And then a couple other defensive ends before we jump to our final segment today. Miles Cole, Marshawn Nealand, and Jonah Ellis. Jonah Ellis was a Shrine Bowl type guy from Utah, had a fantastic week there. I think he's the younger brother of Caden Ellis for the Falcons as well. So some NFL ties, but some really good ones there. Then at linebacker, Jalix Hunt and Edge Cooper. Those are 2 guys who have the length on paper, have the athleticism on paper. I'm excited to see what they do this week, but look, when I see 34+ inch arms, I just circle that right there for Chris Ballard, because we know, again, with EJ Speed, Bobby Okereke, Zaire Franklin, Darius Leonard, I mean, these are all the type of guys that he likes at linebacker, the super long, super athletic linebackers. And there are a couple in this class, despite it being a weaker linebacker class. So Edge Cooper, I know that's everyone's favorite linebacker right there. I think everyone's keeping an eye on him.
Yeah, everyone, because again, this isn't a super great linebacker class, so there's not much uniformity to the linebacker rankings. Huge combine performance could make him the most popular top linebacker in this one. For Colts Twitter, that seems to be the move as well. Jalix Hunt, I want to see something from him, because when I was looking at measurements for the Senior Bowl, he's like Houston Christian or something, like tiny school, but I saw the measurements and I was like, okay, clearly I need to watch him. And I didn't notice a thing from him in Mobile. So I'm hoping he tests really well.
Yeah.
To maybe where I can identify him as a day 3 pick for the Colts.
There we go. Now, coming up, guys, we're going to switch gears, talk about some of the Colts coaching changes. We got some official word on them, plus an additional staff move that wasn't announced before. We're going to talk about that here coming up in a second. But first, get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning of a $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. I know all you Indiana Pacers fans are betting the over on every single game because there is no defense being played in these Pacers games. I don't know what to think about these Pacers games at all. Every single night is a new adventure. So you can enjoy that adventure even more with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Jake. So you put down a bunch of stats and nerd numbers here. So I'm gonna introduce these new coaches, and you're gonna nerd out about them with all your little nerdy numbers. So the first one, new passing game coordinator Alex Tanny comes from the Philadelphia Eagles. And what's interesting, what my little thing I'll throw in here before I pass it over to you is, I don't think the Colts have had a passing game coordinator since 2021.
Patullo.
I think it was with Kevin Patullo, who left obviously to go to the Eagles as well. So the first time they've had a passing game coordinator in a couple of years, they bring in Alex Tanny, former NFL quarterback, former Colts legend at NFL quarterback. I think he maybe suited up for like a game for the Colts.
Yeah, it's like 2015. I think he was in camp or something.
There we go. Colts legend Alex Tanny returning to bring glory to Indianapolis. What can you tell me about Alex Tanny from all your numbers here, Jake?
Yeah, so I mean, the guy, he's one of those guys that just he keeps falling upwards. That sounds bad, but like he keeps getting promoted wherever he goes. So he spent 3 years with the Eagles, 2021, 22, 23. So he's with Shane Steichen in 21 and 22. He ascended from offensive quality control, assistant quarterbacks coach, and then was officially quarterbacks coach last year. And I know a lot of people have been kind of skeptical on this because it's like, hey, the Eagles weren't that great offensively last year. Jalen Hurts took a step back. But, I mean, I don't know how much Alex Tanny was a part of that. It seems like kind of a systemic issue there in Philly. Like,
right.
The whole ship kind of was rocky. But I took apart some stats, some important passing stats, I think, over the last few years. I really want to lean into when Tanny was with Steichen because I think we can all tell by now the Eagles missed Steichen last year. But in 2021, the Eagles were tied for giving up the 6th fewest sacks, 13th in yards per attempt with 7.3, only 25th in completion percentage, but were 18th in pass rating as well. I think that was Hurts' first year really starting. So they're kind of working him in. Now the big year, 2022, when they went to the Super Bowl and everything, they were tied for 2nd yards per attempt, 6th in quarterback rating, 13th in completion percentage. They did start to allow some sacks, though they were tied for 20th. And then you kind of get a little more stability last year, honestly, after Steichen left. Tied for 10th in YPA, 7.2, 11th in sacks, 13th in completion percentage, and 19th in pass rating. So just kind of average across the board. But they've never been terrible in anything. And Tanny is still, he seems like a young up-and-coming coach, kind of like Steichen has been going for. Like, how many young up-and-coming guys that aren't necessarily established left have we seen be part of this staff in the last couple of years? It seems like an interesting one to me, and it doesn't hurt having an extra set of eyes in the room. They already have kind of a hefty quarterback room when it comes to coaches and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't really have much clarity on it. We can even ask Steichen about it tomorrow and talk about, what did you see in Tanny in your time working with him to bring him on as passing game coordinator? But until then, all we can do is speculate, and it's a coaching move. It's not anything we can purely say is going to be a major plus or negative, right. But it's definitely not like a nepotism hire or something like that. It's not some guy's kid or anything. Tanny did have to work his way into the NFL. He churned out a nice little career for himself from a guy who had no business being in the NFL. So, I mean, look, I'm not going to shoot it down right now at all. I like Alex Tanny. I'm glad he's here, and we'll see what he can do. Again, former Colts legend bringing back glory to the Colts. I mean, this is from the glory days of Indy.
Just like Reggie Wayne.
Just like Reggie Wayne. The former Colts player, Cato June, Reggie Wayne,
next in line.
Now Alex Tanny. It's
Tanny time.
It's Tanny time. Now, we did have 2 replacements. Defensive line coach Nate Ollie, his contract expired, as well as assistant DB coach Mike Mitchell, his contract expired. They are both replaced by veterans. One veteran was Charlie Partridge on the defensive line out of Pittsburgh. Very, very well-respected coach. I mean, in Pittsburgh, people loved him. Has that tendency to just develop talent. I mean, look at Kalijah Cansey. I think he was a 2-star prospect going into Pittsburgh. Ends up being a first-round pick coming out of that draft last year.
Tore it up against the Colts.
Yeah, really, really great player. Did a fantastic job this past year with the Buccaneers. And then even before that, J.J. Watt, Trey Hendrickson, these are all guys who worked with Partridge in college. So we're really high on that signing. Obviously, that's going to be a really, really good hire there for the Colts. And then Justin Hamilton, former defensive coordinator for the Virginia Tech Hokies, which you guys know. I'm from Virginia. I love VT. He used to play for Virginia Tech back in 2005. Under Bud Foster. Bud Foster, one of the best defensive coaches in college football since the 2000s. Most recently spent time with the Tennessee Titans as their assistant DB coach last year. Goes to a lateral role here with the Colts. I mean, again, it's another guy where we don't really know a ton of him, but I know that Gus Bradley has some connection to Virginia Tech and Bud Foster in some way. I mean, Divine Diablo was from there. We got, Brandon Faison was from there. We got Cam Chancellor from there. He clearly likes something about Virginia Tech, and Justin Hamilton just adds to that. So
big Blacksburg guy.
Yeah, big Blacksburg. Me too, man. Me too. I love me some VT football. I mean, not recently, but I love me some VT football during the Beamer days. And Justin Hamilton is a little piece of that, so I'm excited. But Partridge and Hamilton, I think these are going to be good hires, especially Partridge. This could really take the defensive line group to the next level.
I am excited about that one because obviously Nate Ollie got a lot out of that Colts defensive line with the attack front and everything. I mean, again, 51 sacks, Indy era franchise record. And now it seems like you've even upgraded at one of the more important position coaching roles on the entire roster. It feels to me like you have this, I'm not going to say untapped talent because we've seen guys like Dio Kwity, Samson Ebukam. These guys have opened up a bit, but like if you want them to go to the next level and reach their potential, this seems like a really good hire to have made to get those guys to that point. Right.
And then Colts made one more move here. Director of Sports Performance Mike Minnis comes over from Philadelphia. We don't have much to say on this because I don't
Rusty
really.
Jones.
Replacing Rusty Jones. I mean,
I don't know anything. Great guy.
Great guy. Rusty Jones, great guy. Mike Minnis, probably a great guy.
I'll see him at some point. I don't know.
I'm sure the sports performance area of this team will be great under Mike Minnis.
When I see the things on the video boards in the Colts locker room, it seems like they're very on top of hydration and nutrition. So I think he's going to be on top of it.
That's our in-depth analysis on Mike Minnis. I think that these guys are going to be hydrated next year. It's going to be great. No cramps at all.
Not a single.
If there's even one cramp, though, I know I'm going to be the first one leading the Mike Minnis should be fired train there. But those are the Colts official moves. They announced them this week. Mike Minnis, Director of Sports Performance, Charlie Partridge, D-line coach, Justin Hamilton, Assistant DB coach, and Alex Tanny, passing game coordinator. Again, we'll be talking about these throughout the season and stuff like that. Obviously, Mike Minnis is going to be a big topic all year for the Colts. I
got to be honest. I kind of wish it was Snoop Minnis instead, the old wide receiver.
There you go.
It's fine.
There we go.
Don't know the guy.
Before we get out of here today, guys, though, we do want to mention one more time the Indy Draft Guide. If you guys haven't picked up your Indy Draft Guide yet, look, Indy Draft Guide's pre-orders are now open for $8.99 with code DRAFTMISS. You get access to an essential piece of reading for Colts fans, both before and after the draft, featuring 225 in-depth scouting reports, features, Build-a-Ballard, and much more. Click the link in our show notes for a pre-order copy today. The guide will officially come out in early April before the draft, so you can enjoy reading it before then. I've been working on this for the last couple of years. I know you guys love it. We are already doing a great job with sales, and we're already, putting this entire book together for you guys. So definitely click the link below for your copy. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys back here beautifully tomorrow afternoon.